Reddit is full of scary stories of all kinds, but what you don't know is that some of them are real and didn't end well. In this video, you will discover the most mind-blowing stories on Reddit. But first, if you're new here, remember to subscribe to the channel. The channel's goal is to get 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I think we can achieve it, so please sign up. Now let's move on to the first story. My friends and I can't stop playing a board game. He ruined our lives. I can barely remember what life was like before we found the game that June night. We were 6 bored high school students until trying my best to fill the void. Most of us had part-time jobs in the summer, but we were hesitant to spend money on anything. We all hoped to save for college. After what felt like hours of going back and forth to decide what to do that day, we took a walk around our suburban neighborhood. It was the end of a garage sale, and most people were packing up and heading inside. A few people still remained outside eager to sell. We didn't really intend to buy anything, but I still dug through the last bits of used crap people put out. I always think I'm going to find some kind of amazing treasure, but I always end up questioning my purchases hours later. I found myself digging through a shoebox full of old board games. I thought I could find a new game for all of us to play. I also figured since it was the end of the day, I could get it for super cheap. At first, I only saw games that looked in too bad shape to buy, or it was a game I knew my friends wouldn't want to play. I've always been a fan of board games, but my friends not so much. I had to beg them to play D&D with me for months, and they were only willing to play on my birthday. I'm always trying to find new games that might interest them. I was ready to give up, but then I saw a game in the background that I had never heard of. Jobs with Friends, with the tagline, "The game you and your friends will never want to put down." The box looked colorful and well-worn, but not so bad that we couldn't play with it. She just seemed very loved. I tried to open it, but the sides were held together with tape. I mean, it makes sense. You don't want all the pieces to fly out after all. I didn't see any label or sign indicating the price. So I looked for the owner and asked her, "Excuse me, how much are you charging for the game?" I anxiously asked the woman as I admired the brightly colored box that had no company branding or trademarks on it. "Ah, that old thing, I don't know. Do you have $1 with you?" the woman said as she put the leftovers from the garage sale into a large box. When she told me the price, I perked up and started rummaging through my bag. Either she was annoyed that I was taking so long, or she just wanted to be nice and told me to just take it. She immediately started going back to her crate again. "So, is the game fun?" I told her. "Actually, I never played. My friend Jen gave it to me a few years ago because her kids were obsessed with it or something, so she just wanted to get rid of it. She thought my family would like it, but we never got to play," she said with her back to me. I kindly thanked him and called my friends to come see what I had won. As I called out to them, I could see their curiosity about what I found. That excitement was quickly lost when they saw that I had a board game in my hands. They rolled their eyes knowing I would try to get them to play with me. "Kate, you know we don't do this board game thing," Aaron told me irritably. "Come on, guys. You've all been talking all day about how bored you are. At least try. This game looks like a lot of fun. I've actually never played this one before, so we can all learn together," I said as I saw their faces start to get curious again. James came up to me and gestured to the box in my hand. I handed it to him, hoping he would be convinced to play after looking at it. I knew that if he was in the mood to play, everyone else would be too. As he held the box, I could see the expression on his face change from doubt to excitement. "This game looks fun. Let's play," he said with a euphoric tone I'd never heard him use. He started running to his house, with me close behind, and the rest of our friends walking slowly behind me, looking confused as to why James was so excited to play a board game when he was normally the one most against them. We all went back to James's house. We walked in and were greeted by his mother, confused as to what had her emotionless son so excited. As we stood at the not knowing what to say, we heard him calling us from the basement. We ran down the steps to see the game completely assembled on the floor and ready to play. He was sitting on a pillow reading the instructions with intense concentration. "James, are we really playing this game?" Bree whined. "Yes, we are. I promise. If you guys just sit down and start playing, you'll have fun. I had the chance to learn the rules while you guys got here." James insisted as he shuffled a stack of cards one last time. After a few minutes of back and forth, everyone was seated and ready to play. James explained the rules of the game straight from the intrusion manual. Each player starts with their token at the beginning of the board. Players will take turns to draw a card from the top of the deck. Each card will have a task. If this task is completed, you can move the number of spaces specified on the card. Once you see the letter, it will say secret or public at the top. If it's a secret letter, don't read it out loud. This task must be completed without anyone noticing or questioning the action on the letter. For example, hold someone's hand, sing a song, insult someone, etc. Just complete the task without anyone calling you. If a player does something that you believe is a secret task, say out loud "deceitful" if the player is caught. They will show their card and fail their task. Do not move any parts. If the person shouting "deceiver" unfairly accuses the player, they must move back one space. The accused player will keep the card and continue trying to complete the task. After successfully completing a secret task, you can announce "task complete" and move your token as many spaces as specified on your task card. If you pull a public card, you must read it out loud. These cards will include things like saying the alphabet, don't say or until your next turn, singing a karaoke song, pretending to for a minute, etc. Some cards have time limits and specific instructions. Each card will clearly indicate the task. The player who takes their token to the end of the board wins. The game will begin with the player who lied last drawing a card. Take turns drawing one card at a time, with the person to your right going next. Have a good time. James folded the paper instructions and placed them beside him, asking if anyone had questions. Nobody said anything. It seemed like everyone understood the game well, or maybe they just didn't care yet. "All right, let's start the game," James proclaimed, but was met with blank stares. "Come on, guys, I just read the rules. You should know how the game starts. We have to start with whoever lied last." Everyone remained silent. No one wanted to tell their last lie. "This is so stupid. I think I will. I told my mom that Henry wasn't hanging out with us when I left the house. Ready, I go first," he blurted out as she leaned over to pick up a letter. As he looked at her, he rolled his eyes. "This is so stupid. Why are we playing this game?" "Come on, Bree, it can't be that bad. Can you read it out loud?" Henry said, feeling that the card was embarrassing. "A public letter. Pretend to be a cow for 3 minutes." She threw the letter on the floor and looked at Henry, who was on her right, waiting for his turn to end and not wanting to even try. The rest of the group started laughing and encouraging her, singing her name and begging her to do it. After about a minute, she gave in and knelt down. When she started, she was irritated, looking angrily at Henry. As his time passed, I could see his feelings about the game changing on his face. When the timer, she didn't stop for a few seconds. She continued because she was laughing so hard. "That was so fun! Someone move my chip up one space. Henry, it's your turn now," Bree said with a giggle and newfound excitement. Henry looked at her in disbelief. He was so used to his cold exterior, but he liked that this game made him melt. Henry took his card. He made a gesture of zipping his lips shut and shook his head. Me, Bree, and James screamed in excitement, with the rest of the group looking lost, not understanding what they missed that made us so excited. Since Henry had a secret card, it was AJ's turn. She was laughing along, but clearly she was only doing it because she didn't want to look stupid for asking us what was so funny. She pulled out her card and read it out loud. It's a public card," she said with a dry tone, trying to assess the room and observe everyone else as they celebrated her public card. "It says I have to do jumping jacks until my next turn." When she stood up, everyone in the room applauded her except Aaron. When she stood up, she stopped and looked at Aaron. I can imagine he felt like the only sane person in the room and wasn't sure what was going on. After a second of hesitation, she began her jumping jacks. Aaron looked at us, looking at him desperately, waiting for him to read his card. When he finally got his card, AJ started laughing while doing jumping jacks. "Sorry, it's a secret card," Aaron said nervously as everyone moved with happiness. "Well, looks like it's my turn," I said as I leaned, but was interrupted by Henry quickly standing up and launching himself at AJ, throwing her to the floor, interrupting her jumping jacks and making a loud thud when they hit the floor. "Henry, what the hell are you doing? What is wrong with you?" Aaron shouted in a serious tone that made him try not to laugh at the end of the sentence. "I'm calling a deceiver on that tackle, Henry," Bree declared with a laugh. Okay, you got me," Henry said while still lying on AJ from his tackle. They both smiled about the event, even though it clearly hurt when they hit the ground. "But you have to admit, that was a tricky one." I tried to start my turn again, but was interrupted by Aaron. "There is. Task completed. I yelled at Henry and didn't get caught. I can move 2 spaces, he said as he smugly moved his token 2 spaces on the game board. We continued playing the game for hours. We finished the first game, and everyone wanted to play again, and again, and again. I looked at them in disbelief. It seemed impossible that all my friends were enjoying a board game. It was a dream that came true. After years of begging, finally. Usually on dates like this, at 10 p.m., Bree and Henry would go out to make out in some closet, AJ would go home to sleep, and Aaron, James, and I would be left to try to find something to do, just the 3 of us. It would be 2 a.m., and we would either be exhausted or our parents would call to tell us to come home, or we would be in serious trouble. We all returned to our homes, but we all had trouble sleeping. We stayed up until 5 a.m. for some of us, just talking about the game via text. Strategies, when we could play again, funny things that happened that night. We couldn't get enough. The games we played started out very simple. No task got too wild, and while we really loved gaming, it wasn't like it was taking over our entire lives, at least not yet. Since we played the game at James's house for the first time, we ended up keeping it there. Even though it was technically my game, we always hung out at his house, so it made sense. It was around 10 a.m. the next day when our group chat started blowing up with everyone asking when we could meet up that day. Now, since it was summer and we were all teenagers, we either had work in the morning or most of us slept until noon. But I do not. I would always wake up early waiting for my friends to wake up so I would have something to do, or trying to earn some money as a dog walker. That being said, I was shocked when I saw that everyone was awake and everyone was claiming to have no work. James didn't have a job at the time, so of course he was free, but so was everyone else. This didn't happen often. We all met at James's house around 11 a.m. that same day. Everyone is eager to play. We must have played 10 games that day. The games consisted of us doing accents, being forbidden to say certain words, doing backflips, and so on. Nothing too strange. We realized after a few games that we never received a repeat card. Not once. This was strange because there were probably 200 cards in the deck, but even though we played a dozen games, every card was new. I knew I had a few dogs to walk that night, but I texted the owners to cancel. There was no way I was going to leave while all my friends were enjoying a board game so much. I knew AJ said something about her having a 4 p.m. shift, but as the time approached, she went to the other side of the room and called work. She didn't even mention it to us or talk about it. She just got up, went to the corner, spoke to her manager, and came back. Nobody thought anything about it. After a few minutes, she loudly proclaimed, "Task complete," moving her token up 3 spaces. We looked around confused as to what task she had, and the letter said, "Call in sick to work." We were surprised by this letter, to say the least. It was the first time that a card had to do with something outside of the players. Everyone else in the group canceled whatever plans they had for the rest of the day, although AJ was the only person who completed a task for it. It was around 11 p.m., which made for a full 12 hours of gameplay. Bree pointed out that we forget to eat anything all day. After thinking about it, I realized that I barely drank any water and went to the bathroom once all day. Things started to get out of control that night. AJ pulled out a card that said to go into a closet with the player on your left and kiss them for 5 minutes. Of course, that player was Henry. Bree wasn't happy, but she knew how serious everyone was about the game. She told him she wasn't okay with it, but he insisted it was just a game and wouldn't mean anything. It was worth 4 points for both people who entered the closet. AJ and Henry got up and went to find a suitable place, while Bree freaked out and said she would end things with Henry if he went through with it. It was never completely clear what Henry and Bree were. They didn't like using boyfriend and girlfriend, but everyone knew they were a thing. Aaron tried to cancel, saying that it wouldn't be worth it and to just stop, but it was like they didn't even hesitate. Bree sat on the carpet and began to cry as the timer on her phone counted down an agonizing 5 minutes. I thought I would hear kissing or nothing, but instead I heard talking. It started with soft whispers, then crying and screaming. They were inside for about 2 minutes and then staggered out. "That's it, Henry. I can't believe you would do that for a game. We are done," Bree said with a red, wet face. Henry came and sat silently with AJ. AJ was now beet red too. Even though 3 of my friends were going through something I couldn't understand, they all looked at James calmly and motioned for him to pull out his card. No one had moved any chips, so it was clear they had failed in their task of kissing in the closet. James hesitantly leaned over to pick up a card and read it to himself as we were bombarded by Bree, AJ, and Henry all saying, "Task completed." And then they exchanged confused looks. Everyone threw their cards on the floor and moved their chips. Bree's letter said, "Break up with Henry." Henry's letter said, "Make AJ cry." And AJ's letter said, "Tell Henry you love him." All of these letters were worth much more than the stupid kiss letter. So the kiss task was ignored, and they all individually completed their tasks without ever communicating it to each other. They all saw opportunities to complete a task worth more points and took them. After that moment, it was as if nothing had happened. The girls stopped crying and started laughing and saying how impressive completing the task was. "Wait, guys, something is wrong here, don't you see?" Aaron said with concern, trying to take a break from the game. "Oh, stop. You're jealous because you couldn't move 6 spaces," Bree said arrogantly. "No, I'm not talking about that. Doesn't anyone think it's weird that the letters are using our names now? Not only that, but are the cards somehow interacting with other cards to almost try to make bad things happen? James blurted out. As he said this, it was as if we all froze in our places. Everyone looking at each other, realizing how hungry and tired we were. Looking around the room, seeing how big of a mess we made. Bree grabbing Henry's hand with a sad look and dealing with how much they hurt each other over a game. I looked at my arm and remembered the bad things I had drawn on it with Sharpies to move a space in a previous game. I saw Aaron's jeans that were now in shorts with Scissor's child. I looked at James's legs and saw his shaved leg crossed over his untouched hairy leg. I looked at AJ and saw that she had a huge purple bruise on her arm. At that moment, I remembered feeling like an addict trying to quit. I knew this game was hurting us. I wanted to stop, but I felt like I couldn't. I could see the same feeling in all my friends' eyes too. The desire to say one more game, just one more time, just to feel the euphoria of this stupid game again. I think we need to take a break from this game, guys. It's getting a little weird and out of control, I muttered with the strength I somehow mustered. It was like telling an alcoholic you were taking his beer away. Everyone seemed horrified at the thought of not playing the game for even a moment. At that moment, James's mother came downstairs and was horrified by what she was seeing. 6 disheveled teenagers all sitting in a circle looking like they had all just been through a... Not only that, but her entire basement was a mess. James, what the hell happened to your leg? Are you all playing this stupid game again? I do not believe this. Everyone out of my house. James, you are grounded, his mother shouted in her voice. We all ran out of his house without saying a word to each other, just trying to get home and get some food. As I sat in my kitchen with my long-sleeved sweatshirt covering my now tattooed arm, I tried to eat a sandwich I made myself. I was of hunger. I could feel and hear my stomach growling, but my need to play the game was much stronger. So strong that I didn't even want to eat it. I sat at my dining room table staring at that sandwich for what seemed like an eternity, telling myself I needed to eat and that I would feel better if I did. But somehow the thought of the game was taking all my energy. I was holding back the urge to text my friends. This took every ounce of self-control I had. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket, and I involuntarily grabbed it so quickly that it was in my hand before I could even think about it. It was James in our group chat. Hey guys, do you think that was a long enough break? I think I can find where my mom put the game and take it to that old treehouse behind Mr. Baker's house. I couldn't hold back any longer. I had to play again. Before I knew it, I was sneaking out of the house, trying to remember where the old treehouse was. As I ran through the neighborhood, my phone lit up with messages from friends saying they were on their way. After running for a while, I found the treehouse. I couldn't believe I had so much trouble finding it, considering how much time some of us used to spend on it in elementary school. I could hear all of their voices sounding angry as I was the last one to get there. I climbed the old wooden stairs to find all my friends sitting in a perfect circle, barely able to see the board or each other. It was at this time that something strange happened within the game. It wasn't necessarily about winning the game, it was about playing as many games as possible and completing as many tasks as we could. If someone won a game or finished a task, everyone felt euphoria, not just the winner. Because of this, players stopped calling each other to try to complete secret tasks, so people stopped being so secretive about completing secret tasks. They still kept them a secret because it was a rule of the game, only no one called them out. It made us all more ruthless. I sat on the wooden floor between Bree and James. Our next game has started. AJ drew a card first, and it was a secret card. She didn't seem dizzy. She looked flushed and scared. In fact, it seemed like the mood had changed with everyone. We weren't laughing much anymore. We were afraid to stop playing. It was something in our guts that made us have to play, like a virus growing inside us, desperately trying to get out. Then Aaron pulled out a letter and read it out loud. "Hold your breath for 5 minutes," he whispered in confusion. "How am I going to do this?" he said, trying not to be worried. It's not that the card was that bad. It's just that he knew he would spare no effort to make it happen. He told us to keep playing while he did this and set a timer on his phone. He took a few deep breaths, then closed his nose and became extremely focused, not making eye contact with anyone. Then it was James's turn. He had a secret letter and didn't show much emotion with it. Next, Bree nervously picked up a letter, and once again, it was a secret letter. In fact, we all drew a secret card until it was Aaron's turn again. It had been about 45 seconds, and he was really focused, and we didn't want to make him draw a card while he was trying to finish his task. As we sat and watched our friend turn redder and redder from holding his breath, we found ourselves in complete silence. Besides the wind blowing through the trees outside and the soft sound of crickets in the distance, we all just stared at each other, terrified by what was on those secret cards. I knew I had to use every bit of self-control I had left in my body to not try to complete the task on my card. I was betting that was why everyone was so quiet. Everyone had tasks they didn't want to do, but they felt an uncontrollable urge to do them. My card said I needed to remove one of James's fingers by any means necessary. It was worth 10 points. I couldn't believe I wanted to do this so badly, but I was frozen trying to figure out how to do it. As I stared at him, I noticed he was looking at Bree. I figured his card had something to do with her. It seemed like everyone was fixated on someone else. I looked at the stopwatch Aaron had and was surprised to see that he had been holding his breath for almost 2 minutes. Just as I was about to comment on this, chaos ensued, everyone jumping on top of someone, becoming a large pile of people violently grabbing each other. I didn't read their cards myself, but from their actions it was clear what their tasks were. Of course, as you know, I was going for James's fingers, but James was Bree's ear. Bree was pulling Henry's hair, Henry was AJ's neck, and AJ was trying to open my to catch my tongue. For a solid 30 seconds we were all glued to each other when Aaron passed out from holding his breath. This seemed to take us out of for a while. We ran to our friend and checked his pulse. Once we realized he was still breathing, we got lost in the game again and we all jumped on top of each other to continue brutalizing each other. As soon as I got my teeth around James's little finger, we saw a bright flashlight coming through the cracks in the treehouse and froze. A police officer poked his head through the lower of the treehouse and looked at us in horror. He saw Aaron passed out in the corner alone with the rest of us in a pile of and plucked hair. The officer grabbed us one by one and practically threw us to the ground, where another officer handcuffed us. We had hours and hours of interrogation that night, but we were all released at sunrise. No one was seriously injured, just many bruises and a few clumps of hair missing. Even Aaron was fine. Honestly, Aaron came out in top shape. We were all grounded for the rest of the summer. All the parents agreed that we needed to stop spending time together because they insisted that we have some beef between all of us. Neither of us mentioned that the board game was in the treehouse that night because we didn't want it to be taken away from us. We knew we had to play it again. However, they found out and banned us from playing it again. We spent the next 3 weeks of summer miserable. Each of us tried to satisfy our hunger to play the game by playing other board games or trying to remake it, but it wasn't the same. It was the night before classes started, and I received a Skype message from James. Our parents forbade us from talking to each other, but it seemed like my parents and James's parents had forgotten about Skype. He told me I had to go there right now. I managed to jump out of the window and ran to James's house. I got to his house in what seemed like record time and jumped down the stairs, down to the basement. There I saw the rest of my friends all sitting by the crying. As I got closer, I saw that they were covered in ash. I saw small pieces of what was left of the game scattered on the floor. She burned. My mother burned, James said through tears. Everyone was desperately trying to find any remaining pieces of our precious game. Some of them rubbed the ashes of the game on their faces and arms to try to feel something again. As I watched them, I saw something in the corner of my eye. I looked at our normal meeting area and saw it. I saw the board game outside. Not just the box, but the entire game was out and ready to play. "Are you sure your mother burned down, James?" I said as my eyes glazed over, looking at the beautiful board game that was outside for us to enjoy. "Yes, I'm sure. She did it right in front of me so I would stop looking." As soon as James finished his sentence, he looked at me and then into my field of vision. He saw the game. The next week of our lives was a whirlwind. After James's mother burned the game and it reappeared, we all ran away with the game. We stole a car from AJ's mom after we got him a chore card and left town. We played the game in the car, at random fast food restaurants, and sometimes in parks. That's all we did all day. We would fall asleep playing and only manage to eat maybe a bag of chips or something small during the day. We kept moving because we didn't want to be found. That week, we all managed to lose our jobs, and we all managed to lose the first week of our senior year of high school, all because we were addicted to a board game. I still remember the last game we played. It was a Sunday night. We were in our town, sitting in an old barn near the treehouse we sat in before, all because the board game told us to. Until that moment, we were leaving the house. We didn't want to be so close. We knew we could easily be found by our families and authorities if we were too close, but we had no choice. We were slaves to the game. At this point, we were in terrible shape. With each new game that started, we fell apart a little more. We surround the board with tired eyes and growling stomachs, missing teeth and bruised. concussed heads and broken fingers. Please, we have to stop. I can't do this anymore. I want to go home, Bree said as we were about to start our next game. I can't imagine not playing this game. It's all I ever wanted to do. I think I could if I couldn't play it. I know the game hurts us, but it would hurt a lot more if we stopped playing it. Henry said in a deep voice. Guys, why are we talking? We have to play again, Aaron said as he tried not to cough. I know we have to do this. I have never hated and loved something so much in my entire life, Bree commented. We started the game with shaky hands, moving slowly and holding our breath every time someone looked at their letter. AJ went first. She bent down and picked up a letter, cringing to herself after reading it in her head. Next was Bree. She rolled her eyes and read the words. Public letter. Give waterboard on the player to your right for 5 minutes. Both players move 8 spaces, Bree shyly said as she looked at James sitting next to her. Can't say we really knew how to do it simulated on someone, but we lay them on their back with their legs elevated and drip water on them. We let him take a card for his turn before Bree began the simulated, so we didn't have to wait 5 minutes for them to finish. His card was a secret card. We continued the game with the terrible background sounds of choking and Then it was Aaron's turn. He read his card and shuddered. He closed his eyes tightly and opened them again, as if hoping to be in a dream. As he opened his eyes, he slowly looked at all of us, making eye contact with each of us. At that moment, James finished being subjected to the simulated and he and Bree came to join us. I was so happy they finished. Not just because I was tired of the sounds, but because it meant they could move 8 spaces. Aaron slowly stood up. I braced myself because I figured he was about to hurt us. In an instant, he was running out of the barn and into our stolen car. We all looked around confused about where we were going, but continued playing the game as he drove away. Then it was my turn. Public letter, jumping off the barn roof, 9 points, I said out loud, nervously. Henry and AJ jumped up and started walking outside, not even questioning whether I would do it or not. They were not wrong in their assumption. Before I could think, I was on my feet trying to find a way to the roof. I found my way to the top of the 10-foot-tall building. I took a deep breath and jumped and was greeted with a loud thud as I hit the ground. I felt a searing pain in my right ankle when I landed. I knew I had broken it. There was no doubt in my mind. I was thrashing in pain, clutching my ankle as my friends dragged me back to the barn. We knew we had to keep playing. Then Henry took out a letter. He picked it up from the pile with his eyes closed and brought it up to his face as he peeked just enough to see the words on the letter, then closed his eyes again, trying to pretend he never read the words in the first place. Then AJ took out a card. Even though it was a secret card, I knew it was about me. She glanced at my ankle soon after her eyes left the card. Just as James was getting his card, we saw Aaron return to the barn. We were all in shock when his silhouette became clear and vivid in the doorway. It ran down his arms and hands, dripping onto the earth as we all looked at each other. His eyes were empty at first, but then they turned into pain. We watched him as he walked from the door to the game board, dripping into the game as he moved his token 30 spaces. Aaron, what did you do? 30 spaces? AJ muttered in fear. James, I'm so sorry I had to do this. Aaron whimpered as he sat in the dirt with his secret task card crumpled in his fist. Tell me what you did right now. What the hell does your card say? Show us, James shouted as he stood up. Just as James was about to jump Aaron, Henry reached into his pocket and pulled out some matches that we used to light small while we were running away. We all stood around waiting to see what he was about to do as he lit 3 matches and threw them into the nearby hay bales, the entire interior of the barn. Without hesitation, AJ saw his opportunity and stepped on my ankle as hard as he could. If it wasn't broken before, it certainly was now. I looked down and saw that it was now bent to the side. She then stepped on my other ankle. It didn't break it, but it made me unable to walk. She moved her token 12 spaces. Even though I was in agony with the pain, I still felt an intense rush from it moving so many spaces. Aaron dropped his card in the middle of everything that was happening. James fell to his feet to see the card and began to cry as he read it out loud. Secret letter, James's mother. Move 30 spaces, he said with anger bubbling up. I can't believe you would do that for a stupid game. How could you do this to me? I couldn't control myself. Come on, you know what I mean. I couldn't control myself. Don't do anything you'll regret. Aaron spoke cautiously. Oh, I guess it's a little too late not to do things we regret, James said as he jumped on Aaron with all your strength. It seemed that at that moment he managed to free himself from the control of the game. He wasn't feeling the exhilaration of someone else completing a task. He only felt hate. I was overwhelmed, to say the least. The barn was on. James was trying the woman Aaron, and to make matters worse, AJ, out of nowhere, jumped up and stuck a in Bree's stomach. Now Bree and AJ were in a fight too. Henry and I sat facing each other in disbelief at our surroundings. He looked at me with in the eyes as he picked up a letter. It wasn't even his turn, but I don't think he cared anymore. He knew the others would be busy for a while. The was getting worse. I knew I had to get out of that barn as quickly as possible. Because of the damage done to my ankles, I couldn't walk, so I dragged my body out of the barn, taking the game with me. I walked a few meters and looked back to see Henry standing there. He placed his letter on the board before I started dragging it with me, and I read it as I continued to crawl. Secret letter, let the take hold of you. Move your chip to the finish line and win the game. I managed to leave the barn with the board game in hand. I sat and watched the flames take over Henry. He didn't even flinch when he caught. When I saw this happen, I moved his token to the final space so he could win the game. I felt an intense euphoria take over my body when the game was completed. Just moments after Henry caught, the entire barn collapsed. With all my friends inside, I looked at the barn and then back at the game. I'm ashamed to say that my biggest worry was not knowing who I would play with now. I hate myself for thinking this, but that's how the whole game is. I tried to start a new game by myself and drew a card, but that's when I saw the sirens of police cars and trucks pulling up next to me. I was immediately surrounded by people trying to give me medical attention, taking me away from my game. I scratched myself and threw my body everywhere like a child who couldn't get what he wanted. I remember them giving me some kind of sedative and waking up in the hospital. I was the only person to make it out alive that night. All I could tell the doctors and my parents was that I needed the game, that I had to play the game. It was the only meaning of life. It was the only reason I had to live. My parents gave me a great lawyer, and I got out of everything by pleading insanity. All of our families knew the right people and had the right money to ensure that the news about the never spread. They even managed to make the of James's mother disappearing. When they told me that my friends were all dead, I didn't have much of a reaction. I just kept asking where the game was. When they finally told me the game was gone and would never come back, that's when I lost it. They had to arrest me because I kept hurting the hospital staff with my breakdowns. I started threatening the team and told them all the horrible things that would happen to them if they didn't give me the game back. I ended up in a psychiatric hospital. I screamed and screamed so much that I could never speak again. I almost never slept because all I thought about was the game and how I longed to play it again. My skin was red and torn from my insistence on picking due to withdrawals. After months, I felt numb. Maybe because of all the they gave me, or maybe I was so used to withdrawals that I didn't feel it as much. It still felt like I had an uncontrollable urge inside my bones, but I managed to hide it. They then sent me home after a while. I knew I had to mask my emotions for the game, pretending I didn't care anymore, even if I inside say it out loud. I walked into my room and felt like I was being treated like a baby. My old bed frame was gone and there was only the mattress on the floor. All my sharp shelves were taken away, along with anything else I could hurt myself with. I rolled my eyes, but I knew my parents had to make these changes so I could come home. I sat on my bed and looked around my room, now with a doorknob that locked from the outside to keep me in, as well as bars on my windows. I desperately searched my room to find something to occupy my mind. That's when I looked through my closet and saw him. I saw that beautiful, colorful box that I knew so well, hidden in the back of my closet, waiting to be found. I knew it would come back the first time it was destroyed, but it felt like it was a one-time thing. But here it was, waiting patiently for me to come and play. I tore up the box with a roll in the process and started playing the game myself. With all that said, I can finally say, task complete, and share what my first card said in that solo game. Secret letter, spread the word about this online game so more people can join us. Move 20 spaces. So what you say, want to come with me to a game? I'm an ophthalmologist, and I saw something inexplicable in my patient's eye. Anna, can you accommodate the next patient? I asked, looking up from my notes. Of course, she'll be in room 5, she replied, heading down the hall. I quickly reviewed the patient history that Anna had written. The girl was complaining of a fog that seemed to come and go, and occasional shooting pains in her left eye that began several days ago. Nothing out of the ordinary, really. It was probably just a combination of floaters and dry eye. In my mind, the diagnosis was already locked and loaded, but just in case, the patient was dilated to ensure there was nothing happening to her retina. Satisfied with my hunch, I took off my readers, grabbed my laptop, and entered room 5. Mrs. Myers, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Dr. Ronald. It's a pleasure to meet you too, she replied, her voice tense. Mrs. Myers was a young lady, her hands clutching her purse on the exam chair, her eyes hidden behind a pair of sunglasses too big for her face. Sorry about the sunglasses, doctor. Since yesterday, my eyes are very sensitive to light. Faint alarm bells began to ring in my head, but I pushed that thought aside for now. Oh, it's okay. Why don't you tell me a little more about what's going on with your eyes? I asked, trying to sound reassuring. Well, it's just my left eye, actually. Since Saturday, I feel like my vision is getting worse, as if a fog is forming. And I feel these sharp pains every now and then. It's almost like someone is poking my eye from behind. I had lunch with a friend on Friday who had similar symptoms at the time. I was wondering if it's a weird form of conjunctivitis or something. Maybe. How about we take off those sunglasses and take a look at what's going on with your eye? Oh, sure, she said, taking off her oversized sunglasses. Under the slit lamp, his eyes looked normal enough, with the exception of his left eye being a little... With no clear explanation for his symptoms, I took out my lens and looked at the back of his eye. I hadn't seen more than a glimpse of her retina before she screamed and hit the lens, knocking it to the floor. But even without this abrupt interruption, I would have dropped the lens in shock. In that brief, horrifying instant, I saw something that defied all logic. His optic nerve was a pitch-black void, an abyss that seemed to swallow light itself. The optic nerve usually looks like a donut, with a dark orange outer ring surrounding a brighter inner circle. The inside of Mrs. Myers' optic nerve was pitch black. A small, perfect black circle, almost like a miniature black hole, had manifested itself in the back of her eye, absorbing all the light that passed through it. As my mind swirled in a whirlwind of confusion, Mrs. Myers fell out of his chair, collapsing to the floor with a scream that She pressed her hand over her eye, her voice rising in a panicked crescendo. At that moment, Anna burst into the room, snapping me out of my stupor. We rushed to her side, dropping to our knees to help Mrs. Myers. She was inconsolable, moaning and rocking back and forth, her anguish palpable. "Oh God, oh God, oh God," she wailed, her voice cracking with terror. "There's something moving in my eye." As her screams reached an unbearable climax, Mrs. Myers suddenly looked up from her prostrate position. His hand was still firmly cupped over his eye, but now we could see the dripping between his fingers, a red stream staining his pale cheek. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched in horror. Something was moving beneath his skin, forcing his fingers apart from within. The sight was grotesque, a nightmarish fight taking place just beneath his... With a final, bone-chilling scream, Mrs. Myers fell to the ground, her body convulsing violently. His arms fell limply to his sides, revealing the true extent of the horror. Jet black, spider-like appendages erupted from his eye, each one glowing with a wet, unearthly glow. They waved and writhed, seeking purchase on the slippery linoleum tiles. Each movement left scratches on Mrs. Myers' face, the red lines contrasting sharply with her grayish skin. The appendages moved with a life of their own, a ghastly spectacle of writhing limbs that defied all logic and understanding. The room was filled with the sickening sound of her scratching against the floor, mixed with the weak, gurgling moans that escaped Mrs. Myers' lips. The sight was more than I could bear, a sight straight from the depths of a feverish nightmare. Anna and I immediately fled the room, leaving Mrs. Myers' writhing body and increasingly enlarged limbs writhing in a puddle of in floor. The next few hours were a disorienting blur. The police arrived, cordoning off the clinic. Soon after, men in black suits took over, their presence cold and methodical. Anna and I were separated, each placed in stark white rooms and interrogated, forced to recount every harrowing detail of what we had witnessed. The interrogation was relentless, and it felt like we were trapped in a cycle of terror, reliving the nightmare over and over again. Finally, we were released, but only after signing heavy confidentiality agreements. I'm writing this in my room right now. I know I signed the NDA, but someone needs to know. The idea of going back to work seems impossible. I think I'm going to take some time off, maybe go fishing or finally make a dent in the Netflix watch list I've been building. But first, I need to take some Tylenol for that splitting headache behind my eyes. My friends and I started a cult in college. It was funny at first, but it took a sinister turn. 10. He is sure? Yes, I have told them many times, Mother, I am sure. I take a deep breath, moving my thumb along the edge of the phone. My hand is slick with sweat, and my eyes shake and dart from one corner of the room to another like an addict. Okay, does this mean something good? Asks my 12-year-old daughter, Ria, on the other end of the line. I don't know what to say to her. I feel something dripping on the back of my neck, probably sweat from my hair, or and everything is fine. Okay, bye. Goodbye, honey. That morning when I left the house, I knew what I had to do. I only hoped they would start showing up after I returned, not before, when Rhea and Jocelyn were home alone. I called Rhea and asked her to tell me how many customers had shown up at our door waiting patiently. That's what I keep telling her. Mom sells newspapers and she keeps them in the basement where she prints them. That's why people keep showing up at our house. When she said that 10 people had already arrived, my heart skipped a beat. There are many, many indeed. I understand they are anxious, but chasing us? With a sigh, I clean the from my phone and put it in my pocket. My black boots are wearing and your sticky and slippery. I wanted your was red. In recent years, it has only gotten darker. Your open eyes look straight into my soul. He's my Mona Lisa, watching me no matter where I go around the room, my damn work of art, until the separate us, and now we part, at least for another year, until I have to kill him again because this guy keeps coming back. After I finish cleaning up, I get behind the wheel and head south. That's what we agreed on a long time ago, when I still loved him. I like to say he fell out of love with me over the years, but I know his heart never felt that way. The road is long and difficult to cross. I can feel your eyes from the back seat, and my fingers are white from gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Trees surround us. I would have nowhere to go, and no one would hear me scream if I got out of the car. It's getting harder and harder to carry this burden of I just hope I can put an end to this. I keep having flashbacks of what used to be. I'll tell you, I don't even know why I chose this forum. I guess I was hoping our followers would see it. I don't even care anymore if they... This confusion has lasted more than 15 years. It was 2009, and we were sophomores in college. Parties back then were more authentic. No one bothered hiding, lying, or pretending to be someone they weren't. Me, Juliet, Adam, Ophelia, and Anthony used to hang out all the time. This party was at a sorority house whose name I can't quite remember. We were all drunk, and in the dark of night, when the music and other people's had run out, we dwelt on ghost stories and so-called deep talk. Anthony had his arm around me and was looking away as he told these freshmen about a notorious campus legend that he was making up on the spot. At one point, someone asked us how we met. Instead of the real answer, Juliet and Ophelia were sisters, and Adam and Anthony were mine and Julie's boyfriends, Anthony leaned in, eyes wide and bright, and lowered his voice. We're in a cult. The freshman, also drunk, laughed and wiped his face. Yeah, okay. You didn't tell them, did you? I asked Anthony, pulling away from his embrace. It's okay, relax. It's not like I'm recruiting them or anything. Even though Julie and Oph weren't close enough to hear, they got the joke. Look, Julie began, if you want to laugh, that's fine. It's not a big deal anyway. It's not like we have someone still, but we're planning on it, Oph said. Anthony silenced her. This afternoon, let's all go home. He gave us a fake look, but Ophelia's face was glowing as she continued. It's really a matter of time. You don't know what anyone can do with enough ambition. Just then, a boy who we assumed had passed out on the couch looked up. What the hell are you talking about? I let out a sigh. I thought you were sleeping. You shouldn't have brought it up, Tony. What did you bring? Asked another girl who was passing by. We're in a cult, Anthony said again. I don't understand why you guys are so secretive about this. It's the most fun I've ever had in my life. Some didn't believe us and told us to leave, but the few who did leaned in. This girl, Laura, heard us say we wanted the woman someone, and even though I suspect she didn't really believe in our cult, started asking us questions, thinking we were deranged people who were actually planning a... So, what is this cult about? What do you love? Oh, it's kind of a long story. I wouldn't even know how to explain it. I sighed. Is it a deity? A god? Adam's face fell. We don't believe in gods, he spat. So, one of you is the leader? No, I replied at the same time as Julie, who had said yes. I mean, it's not that easy. None of us have met him yet. We are just some of the members who can talk to him. The others are initiates. The laughter around us began to down as more and more people gathered around, believers and non-believers, who just needed something entertaining to listen to. At some point, a guy, Ronan, in an attempt to make fun of us, asked us if we were just organizing orgies. Anthony turned to him, his mind damp with alcohol, and slapped him across the face. The room fell silent. Do you think we're joking? People trying to get in, and you think we're some weird club of maniacs who love an old man? You have no idea, and even if you did, you wouldn't accept it. Some of you are so narrow-minded. You wouldn't know what it takes to be a part of it. You're all in your 20s, and you walk around thinking you have some purpose on this earth, only to end up working 9 to 5 and shooting yourself in the head at 40. We do not strive for heaven, and we do not fear hell. Our destiny is much more than a simple coin toss and trying to get off the naughty list. There is no crime on this earth that is not excusable, but even the smallest act can be punished. We are loyal to ourselves and to Him and Him alone, no other God, no statues. His passion scared us, but it was fun. Anthony then added, if you want to know what it's really like to be part of something bigger, to protect your soul and take it to where it needs to be, then I'm here for any questions. And the woman people? Someone asked from behind. Anthony smiled. Every cult has objectives. We move evolution, whatever the cost. The next week passed normally, and we laughed about our cult. It became an inside joke between us, but no one really asked us about it. I think most people had forgotten our early morning conversation. This happened until March 11th, when a student, Sonia, threw herself from the 7th floor of the science building. She had committed, and there was not enough evidence to attribute this to anyone else. However, as I was walking to my dorm one night after dark, someone stopped me. I recognized the boy from the party. You did it? What? Did you kill your cult? My eyes widened and his grip on my hand tightened. I'm not a police officer. All good. I want to go in. What? I want to go in your cult. I'll pay you. That was a joke, Christian. In fact, we are not from a sect. We were drunk as hell and wanted to make fun of you. He let go of my hand. You don't need to hide from me. Don't try to pretend. I tried to move away, but he grabbed me again. Look, we're a lot alike. I've had desires all my life. It started with animals. I just wish I could do something bigger with them. I want to enter. I want to help you your big plan. I don't know what you love, but I'm eager to find out. I panicked, and seeing that I couldn't escape his desperate pleas, told him to just talk to Anthony. When I met my boyfriend a few days later, he had a beaming smile and took me to a much fancier restaurant than the one we frequented. What happened to you? Suddenly you have money or what? Were you a secret millionaire? He shook his head. Remember that Christian kid? I frowned. This counted as an answer to him, and he continued. He bought into this whole cult thing. His father, he for a while, and he has a fortune on his hands. I told him I would make him an initiate if he made a donation to help our research. What the hell is that? What research? You don't even know what... Look, he agreed to make donations from time to time, and I just blabbed about our cause and whatever. It's not like he went to the police. He can. A girl he... and we indirectly tied ourselves into that, and now we're taking advantage of him and stealing his money? You are crazy? The boy is already a psychopath. He killed his father, Emma. If he says anything, I'll report him. You have no proof. He admitted that to me. I turned my head and he grabbed my hand. Thousands of dollars, he said, kissing me on the cheek. Do the others know? I'll tell them. Oh, and I gave our deity a name. Everything needs a name if we are going to worship it. What is it? Kanu. Came to me in a dream, he said, and I couldn't tell if he was joking or not. Over the next 3 years, our cult gathered more followers. The cult of Kanu, whose followers had no name, no race, no age, no gender. We were individuals fighting not to be judged, and we lived free, by our own rules. I, Ophelia, Juliet, Adam, and Anthony were the 5 fingers on Kanu's hand, and each of us had our undisclosed duties to the deity, which involved donations from the other members. All thanks to Anthony, whose qualities as a preacher were undeniable. The public also helped. The cult sought out mostly isolated individuals with desires like Christians, who wanted to believe that their anomalies in thinking could help a greater cause. We told them to curb their instincts and wait for our call, which never came, and continue donating to our research. The authorities never noticed. How could a would-be serial killer report us to the police? What could they say? Yeah, these guys took all my money and I still haven't killed anyone. Serious. Everything went very well in these 3 years. We make a lot of money by lying to people, and we even put some effort into this cult. Ophelia and I draw pictures, visions of Kanu, and claim to read articles to people about his actions in the past. We searched and disappearances and linked them to him. Christian, our first follower, started using and saying that he saw it. He was a devout member and made donation after donation, treating us like gods and saying he was waiting for our call. He would send us sketches of his visions, which were mostly and screaming faces. He kept drawing faces over and over again, and one stood out in particular, that of Ophelia, who was terribly angry. I knew he was in love with me, but I really don't like his drawings. Tears stream down my face as I step on the gas. In the backseat, his eyes are bright as if he's been crying. He tries to hum to calm me down, but his throat is and the air gushes from making him sound like a pig. Ophelia and I were roommates. I came home one night and found the door open, not unlocked, open. Her body was lying on the bed, the sheets of which had turned red, and her head was missing. That's all I remember. I don't know much else. Everything was a blur after that. We couldn't find the head, and I threw away all my red clothes because I couldn't stand the color anymore. Christian said that Kanu came to him in a vision and asked him to kill her. The police caught him to the 5 days later and arrested him. 25 years to life in prison. No one cared that he spat out our names. Everyone thought he was a... When I visited him in prison a few weeks later, I did so just to ask where he had put his head. He said he left it intact. USA, I'm not at your throat. That was our last conversation with him before he left, the woman in prison. And sadness does strange things to you. Anthony and I got married that year, as did Julie and Adam. We thought this could help us stay together. Did not help. The problem is that when you try to stop a cult, your followers may refuse. Telling them that this had been a hoax for so long was out of the question. Instead, we crowned Christian a hero and told them that we were going on hiatus as Kanu had received his sacrifice. The hiatus didn't last long because most of our had a certain thirst for and began to us in our families. Pregnant with Rhea, I told Anthony he needed to do something. The cult began its activity again, this time with some strict rules. No one other than the 4 of us could have visions. No one should act on instinct unless Kanu asked, and Kanu only spoke to the 4 of us. The cult's symbol was a hand with the little finger missing, symbolizing the death of Ophelia. I started seeing these necklaces everywhere with hands on them, and now we had gathered about 1,000 followers. With your monthly donations, we could stop working and retire. Even though it all left a bitter taste in me, I accepted this perverse way of living, knowing there was no turning back now. There was no corner on earth where we could go and hide because these psychopaths could find us. I didn't know it at the time, but we would find Ophelia's head much later. 9 years later, in fact, intact. And that same day, Anthony would die for the first time because it turns out when you mess with magic, even if you make up a name like Kanu, true divinity finds you. It doesn't matter what name you give it. I have to stop now. If I talk about this too much, I'm afraid it will seem convoked, more than I already have to summon. I need you to know that I'm doing this for my children. As I enter the gas station, I fear the cashier will look over my shoulder and see Anthony's body in the car. Then I see the cashier's hand necklace with a pinky finger missing, and I realize I have nothing to worry about. The Sleepwalkers of Camp Moonsong. Everything I wanted when I was a child, it was going to summer camp. Every summer I begged my parents to send me, but they always said the same thing. It's too expensive, or it's too far, or we can't afford to drive there when you come home sick. I know summer camps have lost popularity these days, but they were the coolest thing for a child in the early 90s. Every show had a summer camp episode. There were movies with summer camps. There were even music videos on MTV about summer camps, for crying out loud. I felt like I was missing out on a huge part of my childhood experience by not being able to go, but every year I was forced to sit at home and wish. So when my mom told me she found a summer camp for me when I was 11, I was ecstatic. Camp Moonsong was an all-girls camp about an hour from our house, and the fee for the 60-day stay was surprisingly low. Low enough to make Mom suspect it was some kind of front for a sweatshop or something, and she read the paperwork very carefully with my dad. I remember just hovering outside the kitchen as they went through it, Dad not showing his level of dedication as he held paperwork in one hand and smoked with the other. They talk a lot about not being responsible for injuries or accidents on these things. I remember her saying, sighing, as my father scoffed, "They're just being careful, Wendy. It looks perfect, honestly. She's been begging to go to one for years, and if we don't send her before she's 13, I think she'll miss her chance. You know, 12 years is usually the limit for this sort of thing." They argued for a while, and when they finally came and said I could go, I was so happy. I had my bags packed before the last week of school was even over, and on the second day of summer vacation, my mom and dad took me to camp to drop me off. It was beautiful, one of those camps you see on TV. It was in the middle of the forest with a bunch of little cabins near a lake, and I could see a boathouse, hiking trails, archery courses, and all kinds of things that I was willing to try it. We met the head counselor in the main lodge, a smiling blonde lady named Gladys, and after some hugs and checking my things, my parents came out and showed me the Sparrow Cottage, where I would be staying for the next 60 days. It was there that I met Lauren, Sandy, Heather, and Claire, the girls who would be my cabin mates. Sandy and Heather were 12 years old, and this was their first time at Moonsong, but not at camp. Lauren was 10 years old and had never been to camp before, so this was a first for both of us. Claire, however, had been coming here for about 3 years, and she was the only one of us who didn't seem excited. She was trying to act brave in front of us, clearly not wanting to scare us, but her mood was completely off. Claire was also our cabin captain, so when the speaker came on, welcoming us and telling us to meet at the pavilion for orientation, she led us. The pavilion was more like a small amphitheater, a stone stage with rows of concrete seats running up and down it. We sat in a section near the stage, all of us chatting animatedly except Claire, while the other booths gathered around. Each cabin had 5 girls, and there were 6 cabins in total: sparrow, magpie, grouse, dove, hawk, and crow. They spread out a bit, giving each cabin space to gather. And while we were all sitting around chatting, the camp counselors arrived to begin summer orientation. "Welcome, campers," Gladys said, her voice echoing off the stone benches, "and welcome to another exciting year at Camp Moonsong." There were a few other adults on stage, and she introduced them as the activity directors. There was an advisor for swimming, canoeing, archery, hiking, nature, physical challenges, and arts and crafts. Gladys told us how our daily schedules would be posted on the bulletin boards outside our cabins at dawn, and that each day would end with a roast of marshmallows around the... "And don't forget the is where we chose that night's sleepwalker," she said, something that only earned applause from some of the campers. I saw more than a few of them who looked like Claire when she said that, and I realized there might be something a little strange going on there. Our first activity was archery, so Claire took us back to the cabin so we could get ready. "So what's with the sleepwalking thing?" I asked, Heather chiming in while Claire went to get a slightly more comfortable shirt. "It's nothing," she said, taking off her polo shirt and putting on a t-shirt. "It's just something Camp Moonsong does. It doesn't mean anything. It's just tradition." "What do you mean?" I asked, and the 4 of us followed her to the shooting range. She made a frustrated noise, turning to us angrily. "Just don't worry about it. If they're lucky, it won't be a problem anyway. There are 30 of us. Chances are good that some of you will never need to see this." She said the last more to herself than anything else. "See what?" I asked, but she ignored me when we arrived at the archery range. We had archery, arts and crafts, and a trip to the lake that day, and when the sun set and the came to life, I realized I had completely forgotten about Sleepwalker. We spent a while roasting and eating marshmallows, singing songs, telling scary stories, and then I saw Gladys approach the with a box that was shaking slightly. Some of the girls looked at her menacingly, Claire among them, but Gladys was all smiles. "Okay, campers, it's time to choose tonight's sleepwalker. You returning campers know the drill. If you reach into the box and pull out the black ball, you are tonight's sleepwalker." I snorted, not quite sure why this made some of them so worried. What? Would they come and scare us in our cabin if one of us took out the black ball? Would we have to scare people? What was this, I wondered, because it all seemed a bit ridiculous. The box had barely passed 5 people when a girl of about 8 years old picked up the black ball. It was clearly her first time there because she looked pleased but perplexed as she handed the ball to Gladys. Gladys asked what her name was and then announced that Brenda was the first sleepwalker of the summer. After that, we all went back to our cabins, even Brenda, and I remember sitting with the other new girls for a bit and whispering about how silly it all was. Were they trying to scare us or something? "Ooh, sleepwalking," we all said as we laughed. But when Claire told us to go to sleep, she said something that took the starch off our sheets. "Wait until tomorrow morning, then we'll see if you still think this is funny." She was right. The bugle woke us up the next morning, and we all went to breakfast in the cafeteria. In the midst of munching on cereal, toast, eggs, and bacon, I heard someone sniffling loudly. It wasn't a normal sniffle like the kind you get from someone who is homesick. This was different, and I still didn't have the words for it. I have it now that I've grown up a little. It's the kind of hopeless sniffle of someone who has lost something they can't get back, like a mother or wife crying for a husband or a child. I looked at the crow table and saw it was Brenda. She looked terrible, as if she hadn't slept at all, and the circles under her eyes looked like bruises. She wasn't eating, despite how the girls in her cabin tried to persuade her, and her eyes seemed to constantly cry. The crow's table was next to ours, and she seemed to be telling them between sobs that she wanted to go home. They were trying to convince her not to do it, saying that the chances were low that she would draw it again, and after a few days she would forget everything she had seen. I didn't know exactly what to do with it at the time, but I would learn. Over the next week and a half, I watched different girls draw the black ball. Those who had been here before accepted it better than the new ones, and the new ones always cried the next day. Because of how the schedules were set, we didn't really have much interaction with the other cabins. We lived with the girls in our own cabin, but other than meals and we didn't see each other during the day. Most of them stayed very close to the group during the periods between activities, and none of them wanted to talk about what was going on if you asked. Then, about a week and a half after Brenda took out the ball, Heather took out the jet black orb and was sleepwalker for the night. I remember the look on her face when she took it off, the look of uncertainty and fear, and Gladys named her the night sleepwalker. She returned to the sparrow's hut looking unsure of what to expect, and as we prepared for bed, we all watched her a little apprehensively. "So," Heather asked, "what happens now? Do I start walking or something? Do they come get me at night?" "Maybe they'll make you disappear," Lauren said, and we all laughed nervously. "Go to sleep," Claire said, and we all went quiet as we looked at her. "It won't happen by then." She slid under the blanket and placed a pillow over her head. So we all settled in, turning off the lamp and snuggling up to sleep. Heather was soon snoring, as was Lauren, and I yawned as I fell asleep too. I figured if something was going to happen, it would happen, and before I knew it, I was dreaming about swimming and friendship bracelets and all the other things I would do tomorrow. I woke up in the middle of the night with an urge to pee worse than anything I've ever felt. I was walking back from the outhouse, almost back to bed, when I looked at Heather and saw something that made me stop. Heather's mouth was open in a silent "oh" of a scream. Her hands were bunched up in the covers, and she was slowly writhing in the sheets of her small bed. Her eyes were closed, shut tight like they could be locked like that, and she held her breath like she might be screaming in whatever dream she was having. I woke the others by showing them what was happening, and when Sandy reached out to shake her, Claire grabbed her wrist. "It won't do any good, and it could get worse. You just need to let her get over it on her own. But we can't just leave her like this. She's in pain," Sandy said. "She might be in more pain if you try to wake her. She'll wake up at dawn, so leave her alone." We went back to bed, none of us except Claire asleep. And when the sun came up, Heather woke up shaking like someone who had been terribly scared. She looked around as if something might be behind her, as if this could all also be a dream. And when we went to comfort her, she began to sob. Her eyes had the same dark circles I had seen on the other girls. And she went to the restaurant when the horn sounded like a zombie. She didn't eat breakfast, and when I asked her what she'd been dreaming about, Claire gave me a nasty look. "We don't talk about it. The worst thing you can do is make them relive it. But if we know what happens when you're the sleepwalker, if you're lucky," Claire said, speaking over me as my voice rose, "you'll never find out what it is." "No," Heather said. "No, I want to talk about it." Claire received a pained look. "You don't have to," she whispered. "I know what it's like. It's not something you should relive." "Wait," I said, piecing together something I should have done a while ago. "You knew this was going to happen and didn't warn us. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it wouldn't have done any good," Claire said. "Knowing it's coming doesn't make it any easier. It's terrible. No matter if it's the first time or the fifth time. I was chosen twice last year. Knowing doesn't matter. It's terrible every time." "Do you want to know or not?" Heather said, turning to us angrily. "Because I'm only going to tell you once and then I never want to talk about it again." We said yes, and she gave a distant look as she started. "I was in the forest. It was night and everything was dark. Then I felt something watching me, something like a tiger or a bear or something. It was big, whatever it was, because when it roared, it shook all the trees around me. I started running through the forest as fast as I could. You say I was in bed, but my legs hurt and my arms feel the pine needles that cover them. I ran and ran, but it never seemed to catch me. It was always out of sight, out of reach, and the more I ran, the more scared I became. After a while, I felt like I might be going crazy. I was so scared, so absolutely terrified, and it never ended. Then, just as the sun rose, I heard him roar and heard the trees rustle as he jumped, and I fell as something heavy hit me. Then I woke up and you guys were standing there looking at me." She started crying, and Claire gave her a hug, reassuring her that it was all over and that she was safe now. Needless to say, Heather decided to stay home when we saw it was our turn to walk today. She spent an entire night in the forest and saw no reason to spend another hour observing nature. That's how it happened that summer. Every night we took balls out of the box, and every night it was some girl's turn to pass the time in a state of terror. Sandy had her turn, Laura too, and even Claire had to suffer one night, but I never did. Some of the girls went twice, but I seemed to be immune to the black ball. She never chose me, and if it weren't for the team challenge, I would never have experienced this. The team challenge was Gladys's idea, and she was clearly very proud of it. It was the last week of camp, and I almost thought I'd get away without having to sleepwalk. We were meeting for morning meeting after breakfast, and we all gathered in the amphitheater. Gladys was there, smiling like she had a big surprise for us, and I think she was right. "Good morning, campers. This week I have something special planned. Today we begin team challenges. 2 cabins will face each other in 3 events: archery, canoe racing, and obstacle course. The winners will be immune to sleepwalking that night. The losing booth, however, will have to be the sleepwalker that night. Nobody celebrated, but we all knew what was at stake. What happened was that for 3 days, the cabins would compete. On the fourth day, one of them would win the purchase and the other two would face each other. On the fifth day, the last two would compete for the best cabin. On Saturday, it would be War of Colors and then the resumption. Claire took us aside and said we had to beat this. Everyone in the cabin has sleepwalked at least once. Well, almost all of us, she said, looking at me jealously. I didn't feel good about it. On the contrary, I felt terrible. Heather had already been sleepwalker twice. Sandy too, and I hadn't been chosen once. I didn't want to either. I'd seen them go through this, and it looked miserable. Turns out I had one of the best times on the obstacle course, and I was one of the best campers on the archery field. I felt like we had a good chance of winning this thing, and the girls agreed as we started making a game plan. The Sparrows beat the Crows on Tuesday, and then we got the buyout on Thursday. We were hopeful that we could win this thing, and the encouragement was on full display. The losing team showed up for breakfast with bags under their eyes, visibly shaking as they refused to eat. Whatever was going on, it was even worse as a group, and we prepared to beat the Hawks and take the whole contest. We caught them in archery, but they beat us in the canoe race. We were sure we could beat them on the obstacle course, but then disaster struck. As Claire reached the final part of the track, having gone last, so I could go first and give us a strong start, she slipped and fell off the beam, the race going to her opponent. The Hawks won, and we would be the sleepwalkers that night. We fought it, trying to stay awake as long as we could, trying to stay up all night, but we were so tired. By 11, we were all dozing, and by midnight, we had lost the fight. I remember blinking like an owl as I watched Claire doze fitfully, and when I opened my eyes, I was in the forest. We were all in the woods, looking around as we woke up in some kind of strange, shared dream. I was just trying to get my bearings when I heard the roar that Heather had described, and it galvanized me in a way nothing ever had before. It was like the roar of a bear mixed with something feline and something much deeper. I imagined it was what a Tyrannosaurus Rex sounded like, the scream of some extinct creature coming back to life, and I started to run. They were with me at the beginning, all of us neck and neck as we fled into the forest. He was always behind us, stomping through the trees as if he were as tall as a redwood. It beat, it roared, and as we ran for our lives, it threatened us from the darkness. Heather was the first to fall. I looked back wanting to help her, but the darkness rose and took her. Her terrified, tear-stained face was there for a moment, and then suddenly she was swallowed by darkness. Laura fell next, stumbling as she looked at Heather, and I didn't look back to see her get swallowed too. I kept running, kept showing my heels, and when Sandy fell too, I didn't even notice right away. I was in a state of panic, something I would later call a heightened terror response when I went to college to study psychology. It was similar to the response that prey animals have when they are running for their lives, the kind of thing that gets them eaten by pack hunters when another appears alongside while they are focused on the threat behind them. I ran and ran and ran, my legs pumping and my heart racing. I don't know when Claire fell or even if she fell, but I felt the branches reaching out to slow me down and the rocks hitting my bare feet. I felt every mile I ran and felt every horrible stumble as I almost lost my balance. I kept running for my life, and when the sun finally rose, I didn't stop. I heard it jump. I heard it come up behind me like a tidal wave, but if it hit me, I didn't know. I woke up feeling like I was going to fight off a bully, and the other girls were all around me, looking just as bad as me, if not worse. We lost the of the colors. We were all too tired to concentrate. My mom commented on the bruises under my eyes when she came to pick me up, but I just hugged her and told her how happy I was to see her. I never talked about that summer, not until I wrote my senior thesis on the difference between irrational and rational fear in adolescence. I didn't think I would visit those memories again, not until today. I have worked as a psychiatrist since I graduated, helping children overcoming their traumas and trying to find some relief for them. Most of the time, it's normal things. Parents getting divorced or worries about school and friends. We talk about monsters in closets or stories that don't go away when you close your eyes, typical things, children. But sometimes I help them tell a parent about someone doing something they shouldn't, so that person can go somewhere where they can't hurt them again. Those are the good days, the days when I feel like I made a difference. When the girl started telling me about the dreams, the ones she had after her mother said they enrolled her in camp again, I felt myself starting to hyperventilate. She described dreams of something big chasing her through the woods at night, about dreams that only came when she was at camp, and only when she was the sleepwalker. I didn't even feel it at first when the pen clicked in my hand, and when the girl said, her voice panicked, that I was bleeding. I looked down and saw that my hand had the jagged tip of a pen buried in it. I told her mom that she might want to find another summer camp this year without expressing what I really believed so as not to sound crazy. Mom looked worried. But Jenny loves Camp Moonsong. She's been going every year since she was 9. I strongly recommended that she find another camp for her daughter, and they both left, appeased with a new recipe. I never imagined the place would still be open in my wildest dreams. I sat in my office trying to control the tremors as my hand throbbed like an infected tooth. I'm scared to sleep tonight, something I haven't been since the first week home from camp. I'm afraid of waking up in the forest again, running away from the thing that chases sleepwalkers, the sleepwalkers of Camp Moonsong.